Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're on Masechtas Menachos daf Chaf Vav. We are going to begin on Chaf Vav Amud Aleph, the fourth line from the top. Says the Mishnah, Nitmu Shireha. Let's say after you've already done Kamitza and you've already burned the Kaimitz on the Mizbeach, now you have the Shirayim, then they became Tameh, or Nisrafu Shirah, they got burnt up, or Abdu Shirah, they're gone, so Kamidas Rabbi Lezer Kshera. Kamidas Rabbi Yeshua Psula. So it's actually machlokas whether it's kosher or puzzle. So what is this machlokas, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua? So this is the Gemara in Psachim, which Rashi quotes. In Perek Ketzad Soilin, it says, Dam al Shein Basar. So you could be Zayrik the Dam, even though there's no Basar. For the Basar was lost, so you could still do the Zrikas Dam, and it's fine. So hachinami kaimitz, so the dam is the mater for the basar, and the kaimitz is the mater for the shirayim. Now you could do kamitza of in shirayim. It's even if there's no shirayim, it'll still be kshera. Kshera hakter hakaimitz. So this is actually unlike what I said. Is what you're doing is that you did the kamitza, but you haven't done the haktaira of the kamitza yet. So the machlokas is whether you can do so, because Rabbi Yeshua says, Im ein basar in dam, im ein dam in basar. Namely, just like obviously if you don't have the dam, which is the mata, you can't eat the basar. So too, if you don't have the basar, you can't do the zrika. And therefore, if that's the case, so too you can't do the haktayr of the kamitza without the shirayim. So that's the machlokas. Says the Gemara. So Amarav, v'hu shenitmu kol shireha. This is only a situation where the whole thing is not tahar. Obviously, it's lost. Here, it's completely lost. Here, we're talking about when it says tamei, everything. There's not a scrap of shirayim. Only there, where Rabbi Yeshua says puzzle at that point to be makta the kaimitz. Avol mixas shireha loy. If let's say you still have a little bit of the shirayim which is edible, then that's fine. The nitma in. Maybe this distinction is only when it comes to being tamei, avad v'sarf loy. However, when it comes to avad and sarf, we don't say that. Then maybe it's different. Says Rashi, Kalimer, benitma shireha hudi amrinan im nishtar mixas shaloi nitma kashera afil Rabbi Yeshua. Avduk sa shireha or in nisrfu, let's say some of it got lost or burned. Rabbi Yeshua the psula. He would still say it's possible. Why? We need the whole thing. Kayim to be here. In other words, why does he specifically single out Tuma? There's other cases of our Mishnah. It must be that's dafka by Tuma that we make this qualification, that we quantify it. However, we wouldn't say this otherwise. Okay, when it comes to avad or sarf, which means even if some of it's gone, then that would be problematic entirely. Avad sarf, so my ksaver. Why would he make that distinction? Ik ksaver shireha milsahi, that having some of the shirayim is something of substance. So I feel avad v'sarf nami. Even if all you have is just a little bit of avad v'sarf, that should be enough. That you should be able to makter the ketairos. Makter the kaimitz rather. Ik saver shirah la milsi, it doesn't really matter. So v'nitma my taima. So then why do we say when it comes to the case of tuma, it's dafka if you have any left? So the Gemara answers the maratzat sits, because we know when it comes to tumas, we saw in yesterday's daf, that is something in which the sits is maratza. What we said is a b'shoigeg only, is a b'mezid. It depends if we're talking about a yochid or a tzibor or an akum, so there was distinctions there too. Fine. So the reason is because when it comes to the tzitz, it's maratza, and therefore we're more lenient when it comes to tuma. However, when it comes to these other things, if there's any of it missing, then there's no ritzoi. So yahalchi kosher hanami. So why don't we say the whole thing became tameh? So we say the tzitz is maratza. So why is it only if there's some left there's a difference? Oh, saver shira milsi. Really, it does matter. The nitma, and when it says nitma, it's v'hu adin lo avad v'sarif. The truth is, it's the same thing. The dinim are the same. That it's only considered to be an issue dafka if the whole thing is gone, or the whole thing is tummy. So why they only mention the case of tuma? Mention the other cases. V'adikama nitma rishayu nakat, says Rashi. The nitma masni katani masnis maresha. The cases of our Mishnah, it says v'hu shenitma koshira. It says nitma shira, nisravu shira of the shira. So since it's the first thing in the Mishnah, so that's what we mentioned. Okay. Kedetani Rabbi Yeshua Omer Kedetani Rabbi Yeshua Omer Kol Asvachim Shabbatayra. Rabbi Yeshua also is going to be machshir anywhere where there's a little bit, even by oven sarf, as we see, because all the karbanos nishdayim mehem kazayis basar, as long as there's a kazayis basar left, or kazayis chaylev zarkas adam. So we see that it doesn't have to be the whole thing, even if some of it is remaining, that's enough. Kachatzi zayis basar, kachatzi zayis chaylev, enu zarkas adam. In that situation, we're not going to be, we will not be mitzaref, because one is a chilas adam and one's a chilas mizbeach, and there can't be mitzaref. However, v'oila, by the carbon oil, I feel kachatzi zayis basar, kachatzi zayis chaylev zarkas adam, then is shekul kol. When it comes to carbon oil, the whole thing's burnt up anyway. So therefore, even if they're two different types of things, they can be mitzaref because they're both getting a chilas mizbeach. Of a mincha, when it comes to carbon mincha, feel cool kayemes, even if the whole thing is still around, lo yizrik mincha, then you should still not do zrika on the mincha. So the Gemara says, one second, my mincha lo yizrik. So mincha my vidite, like, where did that come from? So Amar Papa minchas nisachim. We're talking about the minchas nisachim, because what do you mean by zrika? You don't do zrika sadam. Mincha doesn't have that. So we're talking about the minchas nesachim. Okay. Since the minchas nesachim comes together with the carbon, you would say it's kagufa the zivcha damya. It has the same status as the carbon itself. We had this in Zvachim. It says Rashi did havi b'makam basar ki'ilu nishtayr basar. So as long as, even if let's say there's no basar left of the zavach, but there's that of minchas nesachim, so that's considered to be like the zavach kamash mulan, it doesn't make any difference. The reality is that that doesn't count. So minahanimili. So how do we know, as Rashi says, the imo nishtayr basar el chaylev, if there's no basar left, all there's is chaylev, that you can still be zerkas adam. So minahanimili. So Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shmuel, umatam Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, because the pasuk says like this: "V'hikter hachelev," you sacrifice the fats, l'reich nichayach Hashem, and it's a reich nichayach. So what do we see? Chelev v'alvabish in basar. It says specifically chelev, which is mashma. Even if there's no basar, but all there is left is chelev, you could still be zerk the dam. V'ashkachan chelev. So now we know that if there's no basar, but there's at least chelev, so then you can be mark of the dam. However, yoiseres or shesi v'shtei kloyos menon. How do you know by if there's no fats, but there's nothing but the diaphragm or the two kidneys? The katani uva mincha afil kul kayemes lo yizroik. Mincha hu the lo yizroik ha yoiseres v'shtei kloyos yizroik. You make this following diak. This is by mincha, even if the whole thing is around, we don't throw. So by mincha we don't do zrika. But mashma only by mincha, but the aseres, if you have left the aseres nishtei kloyos, which is also like kind of like basar, so therefore that would be enough that you would be able to continue to do the zrika. Rabbi Yochanan dideyo imurech nichayach. What is it? We went from here. Kol shatam mal urech nichayach. Anything that can be brought as a rech nichayach, and therefore that would of course include chayla. Even if there's no basar, because of chaylev havamina chaylev in, you think only if there's no basar, but at least there's fats. But yeseres shtei kloyos loy, that if all you have left is not chaylev, but you have the diaphragm and the two kidneys, that would not be enough to do zrikas adam. It could be even that. Because of Rachmano Rech Nechayach, Havamino Eflo Mincha, you would think even a mincha would be included. Because of Rachmana Chaylev. So it has to be, it says Rashi, the Mashal Rech Nechayach, Lo Marbi, El Dumi de Chaylev, the Megufa de Zevachu. It has to be something which comes from the actual behema itself. Says the next Mishnah. Shaloi b'kli shadis. Let's say you do the kamitza. Now, after you do you do the kamitza, you're supposed to be mekadesh it by putting it into a kli sharis, which is comparable to kabbalah sadam. And then you will do a hayulacha. You bring this kli sharis to the mizbech, and just like zrika sadam, you do the hakatayras kamitza. So that's what's normally done. But here, it wasn't done that way. It says Rashi, Shol kiddush kaimetz b'kli sharis, the b'tchilas mincha vade lo pligi de boy kli. Now, apparently, we hold that you definitely need a kli. So the question is that after the kamitza was taken out, at this time, it should have been carried by a kli, but instead he carried it. He carried out by hand, and not with a kli. So the question is, how does that work? So the Gemara, the Mishnah says, so possible. Rav Shimon machshir. For some reason, Rav Shimon says it's okay. You don't even need a kli sharis. Hikter koimtza. Once you've done the kamitza and you burnt it, then at that point, pa'amim kshera. Even if it was done in parts or halves, that's also good. The Gemara is going to explain on Amud Beis what that means. Says the Gemara. So I'm Rabbi Yehuda bar Rav Chia, focusing on his name. My time with Rav Shimon. Why does Rav Shimon Taka say that it's kosher, even though when you did the maisik of kamitza, you weren't makdish it into a kli sharis? How's that fly? How's that good? So he says like this. Omer Kra, the pasuk says kodesh kodeshim he kachatas ka'asham. So we say in certain regards the mincha has a status like a carbon asham, in certain ways like a carbon chatas. Bol oiv dabiyad. Let's say you did the kamitza, and you have it now in your hand. So we say it's oiv dabiyamin kachatas. So you say that you should do it with your right hand, just like a karban chatas, says Rashi, if there's no kli. Shu'oived namizri kasa be'etzba v'yamin. So in that case, since you don't have a kli, you should make sure that to do it only in your right hand. But if you use a kli, oived b'smoil ka'asham. Then you could even use your left hand to hold the kli, just like when it comes to an asham, that when it comes to the applications of the dam, it says the enucha tain matnas etzma el chatas bovad, and you could even hold the kli in the left hand. Why? And this Gemara again in Zvachim says that loksiv etzma el kahuna. Rav Shimon kahuna boy etzma. Okay, so again, whether or not you have to have those two words in order to say it's ba'akev, that has to be with the yamin, the right hand, not the left. Okay, so anyway, in certain regards, it's like the right. It's like a chatas, in which it has to be with your right, and sometimes it's like an osham that you could use your left. So one is, if it's in your hand, it has to be like a chatas, has to be your right hand. However, the kli can be in your left. If Rabbi Yana Yimer Kivan she comes from a kli sharis, once you do the kamitza from a kli sharis, maleu maktiru afilu beheminoi, ve'afilu b'mekida shel cheres. So at that point, you could already put it, Rashi says, into an avnei, into some type of like a belt. So once it was done, the maisa of kamitza, once that kamitza was done, and you're makdir it, so then you can be makdir it even from your belt, even in a kli of cheres. Rav Nachman Yitzchak Eimer Hakol Moedim. The truth is that everyone agrees Bekaimitz Shitayin Kiddush, that when you do kamitza initially, that it needs to be put into a kli. It cannot just be completely in your hand. So Meisvei, for the Gemara, is that true? Hitr chilav and ve'varim. Let's say a person sacrifices the fats and the limbs, the eitzim as well as the woods. Sha'olon ben biad ben bakli. So we say that these items could be brought up either with a hand or with a kli. Ben biamin ben bismail. Sharon, you can even use your left hand. However, hakaimitz, when it comes to doing the kamitza, vakatairis, and when it comes to burning the spices, balvaina and the frankincense, shola ben biad ben bikli, ben biamin ben bismail sharon. So it says over here, taka, it's also kosher. So tiyot Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Chia, It's a kasha on Rabbi Yehuda bar Rav Chia that Rabbi Yehuda bar Rav Chia said above that the whole reasoning of Rav Shimon, and so let's look at Rashi. The Chi Maksher Rav Shimon, when did Rav Shimon say it's kosher? Is Bahachtir She'im Notel Metoich Kli Sharis La'ach Shekitshu Boy. After it was already in a Kli, then you took it biyad to burn it on the Mizbeach. So it has to at least have been at some point into a Kli. So he says it's a Tiyufta Rabbi Yehuda, as Rashi says. What's the Tiyufta? Yomer biyad oivda biyamin. He said that if you use your hand, it has to be the right hand. The halcha katanya fil biyad smoil below kli, right? But here it's mashma. You could be even in your left hand, even though there's no kli. Rav Shimon, this is Rav Shimon, the hamaksha shul bekli sharis. It must be according to him. So it's a kasha based on what we said before. So therefore, it's a kasha, a tiyufta or Yehuda bar Rav Chia. Shamalach Yehuda bar Rav Chia with stud in katani. You actually have to read it like in sides, like this. Biyad biyamin. If you use your hand, you have to use the right hand. With kli, if you use a kli, bin biyamin, bin b'smoil. Then it could even be with your left. Okay, fine. Toshima. So kamsu shaloi mekli shadis. Let's say a person did kamitza, and it was not from a kli sharis. The kid shalo b'kli sharis, or he's mekadosh it, and it was after the kamitza, not in a kli sharis. Valeu, which is mashmal, it was never put into a kli. Valeu b'hiktiru, and it was brought up, and you burned the kamitza. Shalo b'kli sharis, posel. So Rabbi Lezer, Rav Shimon, machshir b'matan kli. So it's mashma that clearly it can be any kli whatsoever. Ema mimatan kli, from a matan kli. In other words, the question is, does it actually need to first be in a kli initially, and then only afterwards you could take it but biyad? So you're saying ema mimatan kli ve'elach. So once it was at least in the kli, it has to at least be in the kli at one point, and then taken out is where it's allowed. Tashma b'chachamim oimim koimitz. When it comes to doing kamitza, toin kli sharis, it does require kli sharis afterwards. Ketzad koim so b'kli sharis, and mekacha b'kli sharis. So what do? You do kamitza from a kli sharis, right? So you scoop up some flour from a kli sharis, and then you mekadosh it back into a kli sharis. Umleu maktiru b'kli sharis, and then from that kli you can be maktir it from that kli sharis. Now Shimon Omer kivan shekamsu b'kli sharis. Once you did the kamitza from the kli sharis, so then you could actually be maktir it even without in a kli sharis. It doesn't mean that after the kamitza you don't have to put it back into a kli sharis. That much you do as well. Okay, Tashima. Kamatz biyaminoi. Let's say you did kamitza, of course, properly with your right hand. However, nasim b'smoiloi, says Rashi. This is according to Rav Nachman. Shalom b'kli. You didn't put it into a kli. So what do? So yachsu liyaminoi b'smoiloi. So you should go and take it and put it back into your right hand. So if it was in your left, you got to put it back into your right hand, and that would be good enough. And the maisa of everything you did before is not thrown away. That would still be fine. So kamatz b'yamin v'nasim b'smoiloi yachsu liyamino b'smoiloi. As we continue to Chavav Amud Beis. The chishiv says Rashi, Kolomer, im chishiv, if you had the intention, kol zman shehu b'smoil, the whole time it was in your left hand, la machshavahi. That's not considered to be a machshava. There's no chiv kares when it comes to a person who has the improper kavana because it was in the wrong hand. So it's only when you have everything else properly, it was in your right hand, you have an improper machshava. You can still pass it, but it's not going to be a din kares if a person would eat it. Loshin acher. Biyaminoi, in the size that it says over here, biyaminoi, chisha if it's in your right hand, Pasul the inbo kares, but chutz lizmano pigel b'chaim lev kares. We know when it comes to a pigel of time, so the punishment is kares, which is time related. So b'chaim lev kares. Dibur Rabbi Eliezer, Rav Shimon, Rav Shimon, v'chacham amrim kivan shenosnu l'smoil. Once you put it right into the left hand, pasalto mat nasai. It's already pasul. Now just putting it back into the right hand is not going to do anything. So my timer, mishum deboy kedusha b'kli, because you have to be makdish it into a kli. Is small. Once instead you transfer it into your left hand, nasa kadam shenishmach mitzaver behema. It's comparable like blood that was coming directly from the neck of an animal. Al haritzma that fell onto the floor. V'asu, when you scoop it up, shapasul. In that case, it would be pasul. So just like if the dam would fall from the neck onto the ground, that doesn't work. You have, and even if you scoop it up, it has to go directly into a kli. So to over here, if it was transported or put into the left hand, that will cause problems. So Mechalad Rabbi Eliezer Rav Shimon lo boy matin kli. So it's mashmi, he doesn't require kli. So tiyafta Rav Nachman tiyafta. So Rabbi Yehuda Rav Chia misaili Rav Yanai lemet tiyafta tiyafta. So Melachal Rav Yanai on Niamri Ketana the hector v'lavu stud in Ketani. Okay, let's look at question 7. So you did the kamitza with the right hand, which you're supposed to do. Then v'nasim esmoiloi, which instead of putting it into a klisharis, you put it into your left hand. Him yachol lachsoli minu. Can you put it back into your right hand, or is the whole thing pasul? Of course, there's a machlokas. So according to the Rabbanon, who requires hakaimitz after you do the kamitza, it needs kiddush b'kli. That you then need to put it into a klisharis. So nasa smoil, since you didn't do it, it's comparable. Like the left hand is like blood going directly from the neck onto the floor and gathering up as pasul. However, Rabbi Eliezer, Rav Shimon does not require kiddush b'kli. It's not a problem. You have to take the dam, according to them, from the mincha. You have to take it from the klisharis to do the kamitza. But afterwards, you don't have to do it at all. So havli nishmach min a kli shekosher. It's just like it was poured from a kli, and therefore it's not a problem. Okay, let's keep on moving. Fine. So hikter koimtza palmim kshera. So he said in the Mishnah that when it comes to the kamitza, if a person would end up burning the kamitza in parts, in halves, let's say you do half and half, then it's okay. Now, how many halves? So, Omer Rabbi Shubin Levi Pamim, you can do it in parts, well, Pami Pamim, but not parts of parts. Says Rashi, what does that mean? Chatza b'rishayna v'chatza b'shniya. You can do one split in half and half. Well, Pami Pamim, not like 3 or more parts. That we won't allow. Rav Yochanan Omer Pamim, feel Pami Pamim. You could do it even in small increments. So, my binayu, what's the nafgamina? Other than whether it could be done multiple times. So Rav Zera, yesh kaimitz pachas mishnei zaysim. If there's kamitza, which is less than the amount of 2 zaysim, yesh haktar pchusim mikazayas ikminayu. Whether haktar could be less than a kazayas. Rabbi Shimon Levi savar in kaimitz pachas mishnei zaysim. The kamitza has to be at least 2 zaysim. Vein haktar pchusim mikazayas. And it cannot be less than the kazayas. And therefore, that's the reason why he says it can't be divided into multiple times, because you'll end up having less than the kazayas. Rabbi Yochanan savar yesh kamitz pachas mishnei zaysim yesh haktar pchusim mikazayas. So let's look at Rashi. Shnei zaysim hilkach hada nakam asnisin pa'amim. Why does it say you can split it up? It's davka nakan only once. Shedei b'chol hakatar kazayas, because then you'll end up, the whole haktar will be a kazayas. V'lo pachas, but not less. Dein haktar b'pachas mekazayas, because according to him, the haktar cannot be less than a kazayas. So if you keep splitting it up, it'll end up being less than a kazayas. So again, each haktar has to be a kazayas, but not less than that, according to that shita. However, Rabbi Yochanan says no, you can be less. If you hachi katana masnisim pa'amim ksheira. And whatever reason, it says it that way, but the truth is it's a feel palmim palmim. It can even be more times is also fine. Okay, question 8. Hikter kaimsa palmim ksher. Gemara pligi af palmim ksher. So by my mifli 2 answers. So so one is Yesh kaimitz pachas mishnei zaysim. If you can do kamitza for less than 2 zaysim, and also yesh hakatar pachas makazayas. If you can do hakatar for less than kazayas. So again, according to the shita, the kamitza has to be at least 2 zaysim, and the hakatara has to be at least 1 zayas. So therefore, if let's say you hold the kamitzas 2, so then you can only split it up. So it would be 1 and 1. Okay, so that's the idea behind that. All right. And then the Gemara says as follows: Itmar. Kaimitz, when a person does the kamitza, which we know, and you burn the kamitza, so me'amase matir shirayim b'achila. At what point, upon the haktaira, can you now eat the leftovers, the kohanim? Rabbi Chanina Omer, it's mishit mamshul bois or. It's when the fire grabs hold of the katayrus, I keep saying katayrus, of the kamitza. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan Omer mishit tatis bois or baruboy. Just as long as the majority must be taken hold by fire, not the whole thing. So Amalei Rabbi Hudal Rabba bar Rabbi Yitzchak. I'm going to explain to you why Rabbi Yochanan says as long as it's roiv, that roiv is sufficient. Because the pasuk says in Bereshis, Dehini ola kitar haaretz, that the smoke of the earth was kitar kivshon, was comparable to that of a furnace. So in kivshon malo kitar ad shitatzis haor berubai. So he says that when it comes to an oven or a furnace, it doesn't actually, the smoke doesn't ascend until the majority of the fire catches hold of the item. So therefore, it's like almost like some type of a pasuk to support this concept. Okay, so therefore, once you're makter the kmitza and the majority of it starts burning up, the majority is taken by fire, then all of a sudden that's enough to be makter. It doesn't have to be completely burnt. Armali Ravin bar Rav Adol Rava, so Amri Talmidcha, Amr Rav Amram, Tanya, Ainli Ella, Devarim Shedarkin Likar Belayla. So he says like this: these are only things. This is the Talmidim said this in the name of Rav Amram. Says, I would only know things that are put onto the mizbeach at night. Kikoni Varim Badarim. We know that when it comes to the fats and the limbs, they're allowed to be burned throughout the night. Shemalunu maktirim mebo heshemesh, that they're burnt up at the sunset. Umas achlin v'hoychlin kohol laila kula, and it can continue to burn the entirety of the night. Devarim shedarkin lekar biyoim, and then of course there's many things that we are makrib during the day. Kikoin hakaimitz, and that's going to be our primary focus. The kimitza is to be done during the day. V'alvayna v'hakatayres u'minchas kohanim u'minchas kohen Mashiach u'minchas nesachim shemalun u'matir meva shemesh, that it can be burned before the sun. You should burn it up before sunset. V'amr darken lekar biyoim ella im ba hashemesh, before, it means before the sunset. It doesn't mean at or after. If it's burnt up, at least some of it, before sunset, then it can continue the entire night. So minayin, how do we know all of these dinim? Because Talmud Lord with the pasuk says zois tarsa oila. So riba, so that's inclusive of many things. Vaha imba shemesh umishkachasla. So when it comes to before the sun sets, we won't find shitatzis ha'oyer berubai. We're not going to find that the majority of it is going to end up already being caught on fire. We don't necessarily see that that's the case. It says Rashi, kaidim shkesachama. We don't see that the majority of it's already been burnt up. V'ilo chashav hakatayra. If it's not considered to be haktaira until the majority of it, the fire got hold, isuluhu b'shkesachama. So then it should already be puzzled by shkesachama. Ulukasha kan likloit kan lahatir. So this is an important answer. So in order for it to be held onto the mizbeach, shnei mizbeach koltoi, that it holds onto it shlo yisol belina, because it wasn't like done at night. Havi mishmashlo boy haor. So long as the fire hits it, then that is enough. All right. So, however, lahatir to be matir the shireh lo havi haktara just or barubo. Then the majority of it has to be caught and taken by fire. Okay. So there's a distinction between likloit, in which, in order for there not to be a psulina, it has to at least be that the fire is on it, but not that necessarily that the entire majority of it has to be already taken by fire. Okay. Rabbi Lezer masni la mevo hashemish umoikim la bepoikin. So he said the same thing, but he said it has to do with when it bursts off of the fire. So could you pick it up and put it back on the mizbeach through the night? But really, it was brought during the day. It's just telling you that if it fell off, you can put it back on. That's what it's referring to. If, let's say, the kataris fell off the mizbeach, afilu kartin shaba in machzir noisan, we don't put it back. But Tani Rab Chanina bar bin Yomi b'debei Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov, the pasuk says shaytaychel eish, that the fire consumes es ha'oila al mizbeach ichuli oila atamaser. It's only the carbon oil, if it falls off the mizbeach, that will put it back. However, yato maser ichuli kataris, we don't put the kataris back. So some mikan kataris, okay, you're right, you remove the kataris because that, you're right, is not put back. Rav Asi ki poshit the Rabbi Lezer b'menachos b'menachos. Fine. Boy hachi bar Rabbi Lezer kaimitz shesidroi. If, let's say, you have the kmitza that was organized on the mizbeach, the cedar alav esamaracha, and was put the wood on top of it. Mahu derech hakatar b'kach or in derech hakatar b'kach teku. So is that the proper way of doing it or not? On that we have a teku. Let's look at question 9. Mahu adin hanilman Rav Yochanan and Aposek v'hini ola kitor aretz kitor hakivshon. So we said when it comes to kmitza, it matters the shirayim once the majority of it was hold by fire, and we learn from the fact that it says v'hikter that you burn it up. Hilkach be'inon kitor kikivshan, it has to be burnt up just like an oven or like a furnace. Then kitor oila ela mishahatzis or barubai, and the burning only takes place once the majority of it already took hold. Okay. So boy chizkia. So ivarim shesidron. Let's say you have these limbs that were all organized on the mizbeach. V'sido lehenim esamaracha, and you set up the wood on top of it. Mahu al eitzim or machmana davka al eitzim is that on the wood. Odilma kivan dechsiv kra achrina asher teichel eish es oila al hamizbeach on the mizbeach. Iboy hachi yavid teku. You could do it this way, do it that way. Fine. Boy Rav Yitzchak Navka. Evarim shesidrun b'tzidi hamaracha. Let's say you have the limbs that were organized, but on the side of the maracha. Mahu libel madiyamer al mamish u'tiboiluch. Now, according to one who says that mamish has to be on the top, so there's no shaila that wouldn't be good. The al ha'etzim ksiv. Now, when it says al, it means eitzel ha'etzim. It needs to be by the wood. Kiti boiluch alibel madiyamer al besamuch. If the word al means samuch, it says al eitzim, al could be near it, maybe that's good enough. So hachinami al besamuch o dilma al eitzim dumi del mizbech. So mahasam al mamish av hachinami al mamish teku. So again, we don't know exactly what the din is in that case either. We're going to stop there. Let's see maybe a couple questions. TA 5. Mimasai hamizbech koilet as a kaimitz Indian shal yivsabalina. Good question. So from when does it grab it that is not considered to be lina, that you did it too late already, it was after shki already, and when is it considered hakatira to mater the shirayim b'achila? So this is what we said. So likloit the mishalba, or once the fire caught hold of it even a little bit, that's good enough. But to mater b'achila, to machlokas in the Gemara, is it also mimshalabo, or or is it mishitatzis or berubai? Is it necessary that the majority of it has to catch hold? So that's TA 5. And again, let's get this important line. Kan likloit, kan lahater. So that's really the key line over there. Okay. TB 8. Exactly the same question. Let's see if I wrote it correctly. Let's see first TB8. Mark that down. So I wrote likloit l'divri hakoil b'shas hanachas hakarbon al ha'esh. So just putting it on there. V'lo yoiser mizeh, not more. V'yesh machlokas im ze gam l'hater hashirayim. Good. O tzarech ad shiroiv hakarbon yotzu ki I wrote be'esh ki kivshan. Pretty good answer. I'll take that. Adkan.